Parker McCullum. Burn It Down Tour 2024, June 27th, Wells Fargo Arena. ACM Best New Artist, Parker McCullum Live, with special guest Corey Kent. Finally got a handle on you. What in the hell does a man? On sale now at IowaEventCenter.com. Parker McCullum Live.
What does it take to grow beauty and colors more vibrant? More water, the right sun, nutrients. It takes all of that and more. Like family. At Canoer Garden Center and Glass House Market, family is present in everything we do. Generation after generation. From our family to our employees who make you feel right at home. That's the difference you'll find when you shop Canoer Garden Center.
Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Good morning, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome into the Channel Seed Studios for another jam-packed episode of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. My name is Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. Joining me is Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Scott, here we go. Episode 42. We're pushing a year into our venture together here on Iowa Everywhere, and I don't think we've had a week yet where there's nothing to talk about, and we always have more today.
Yeah, we haven't had a horse latitudes edition yet, which is always wild. Usually you get, all right, what are we going to talk about today? Let's bring up some of the things. And as I've told you in the past, we've had when Mark and I used to do it, Mark Morehouse, we'd have two topics that were completely off the grid. We called it a moratorium on Brian Ferentz succeeding Kirk Ferentz, which was actually a legitimate possibility back then. And, should the Iowa State game be discontinued? So, and then we'd reach the horse latitudes of May, June, early July. And then we'd be like, okay, fire away. And then say, shut down. But we haven't had to do that. There's been news every week. There's been some big news.
Yeah. There's news last night. There's potential news coming on scheduling later today. Maybe we'll get to that. The big news that we want to start off the top with, Scott, is the return of Payton Sandfort to Iowa men's basketball. The verdict came in just before 9:30 p.m. last night. My text group subscribers got a little heads up around 7. That certainly makes the 2024-25 Iowa men's basketball season, which will be the 15th under Fran McCaffrey, a lot more interesting, a lot more compelling, Scott.
It does. I think in some ways, Chad, and you could certainly go in greater detail since you had a little more heads up than I did. But I think that the outlook now for Iowa men's basketball went from being bottom half, maybe even bottom third in the Big Ten without Payton Sandfort to now upper half, potentially upper third in the Big Ten with Payton Sandfort. He's that kind of a difference maker. He would have been a top 40 guy in the NBA draft, probably a two-way type of player. And there wasn't really a guarantee to be a first rounder. There wasn't a guarantee to get a really big contract or anything. So at this point, this changes the trajectory of this season dramatically, because I think he's going to be probably one of the 5 to 10 best players in the Big Ten Conference this year.
Yes, it's huge. I mean, he is probably, he's right there with Owen Freeman, probably as Iowa's best player. And that's just significant when you think about the variance in the middle of the Big Ten. Now that it's 18 teams, heck, I don't know what it's going to be, but let's say teams 3 through 15, you could probably almost, throw a blanket over them. And it just kind of depends. And so you need difference makers like Sanford. Now, a lot of guys are returning to school. We won't get into that today on this show, but because we actually do have a lot to talk about. But it's exciting. I think if Sanford had gone to the draft, Scott, and he very well could have. From what I heard, and maybe Payton will talk about this, maybe he won't. I don't. He probably won't talk about this part, but I don't think his agent really managed the process that well. I'd be curious if he maybe finds a new agency in the offseason. Now, if I'm totally off base there, I'm sure someone will call me out on it. But I just think the draft process didn't go as he had hoped and wanted. Not that he wanted to like desperately leave, but I think he wanted like, hey, I want a clear path to whatever it is next. And I don't think he saw that in time for 10:59 p.m. last night. He even alluded to it in a retweet of Coleman Hawkins. He almost needed more time, So he's coming back. It's good for Iowa basketball. Maybe not the best thing for Payton Sandfort. Maybe the draft is really deep next year. But, you have to have the right circumstances, Scott, to go. And I think that's sort of where a lot of these decisions for Hawkeyes have come over the years. Iowa got a huge break. What was it? 2 years ago when Chris Murray decided to return. That was another last minute thing. Tyler Cook, same thing. It looked like he was going to go last minute. He comes back. Iowa's gotten pretty lucky over the years, I feel like, in these decisions. And once again, it makes Iowa a lot more relevant going into next year.
It does. And I think it's really impactful that he's coming back to Iowa and not entering the portal. Coleman Hawkins did, and now it's highest bidder for him. I think Payton Sandfort would probably get 8 to 10 times more than what he's going to get probably at Iowa, or, at least 5 times more than what he'd probably get at Iowa through the NIL had he entered the portal in conjunction with declaring for the draft in the beginning. That said, so his love for Iowa, he reminds me of some of the players from the old days, Chad, like when we were in college, and just his competitiveness, his fire. If you want to see a player who plays like Chris Street, it's Payton Sandfort. He is all in. His emotions are on his sleeve, and not necessarily in a negative way, but losses kill that kid. He's in tears. He's just distraught. He loves this team. He loves this state. And of course, but that said, this is a business decision to go to the next level. And whether it's, Cooper DeJean loves being a Hawkeye too, but you got to take that jump when it's there. And I think with him, with Payton Sandfort, he kind of needed a plan. I think that's fair for whoever takes him. If it's early in the second round, like our guy, Sam, our draft analyst, he had him 36th overall. And, so he had him borderline first round. But as we know, once you get out of the lottery, and then outside of a handful of other guys in the first round, it's not like the NFL where you're coasting for 4 years. It's right. You have a chance to really move around. And I think with Payton, did a team have a plan for him? Probably would have been a two-way player. Come up, play some games, play some spot minutes, go down, kind of Luka Garza plan. Maybe by year 3, potentially you're on the varsity for the long haul. That would make sense. But Chad, in this day and age, with NIL and the competitiveness that you see in the Big Ten, it's not like he's taken a step back competitively. In fact, he may be improving his brand and making more money than if he was just a second rounder that ended up in the G League all year. So I think overall, like a Joe Wieskamp situation, I think he made the best decision for him coming back to college, Iowa being the beneficiary. But even if he would have entered the portal and left, coming back to college, to me, I think was the best decision for him, even with a strong draft next year.
Yeah, and he gets to play with his brother, which, family, relationships are very important to Payton. That was probably a little bonus of coming back for sure. Once again, we want to give a shout out to our new presenting sponsor to Legends and listeners, and that is GameDay Men's Health. Guys, it is time to get yourself right and get back in the game with GameDay Men's Health. They are meticulously awesome when it comes to testosterone replacement therapy. Low T is very common in men as we get older, and trust me, GameDay has a game plan to get you feeling like you're in your 20s again. Get started with a private, free, no-obligation consultation. Visit GameDayMen'sHealth.com at their Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty locations. Scott, I'm almost 3 weeks into my experience at GameDay, and I'm very impressed with their thoroughness, efficiency, and knowledge across the staff. You get in and out very quickly. I am already feeling the difference.
I just started this week. I was a little sluggish, as I normally am when it comes to going to the doctor. It's dragging me there, but I couldn't have had a better experience with Stacy Michael here at the North Liberty location, which is only a few blocks from my house. That they've got me on the right path. I see my levels, and yes, when we enter the old dude stage of being in our 50s, you do need a little bit of a kickstart, and I think it seems to me right now I'm on the right path, and I can't wait to see the results going forward, because I've been lazy over the years, but I think GameDay Health is going to really boost me back to where I was 25 years ago, and I'll take it take it for the next 25 years.
Well, we'll keep you posted as we go. I'm already fired up to lift some weights. I'm feeling crazy right now. A little more Payton Sandfort before we move on to our main topic of the day, Scott. Let's talk about the whole team real quick. You've got Josh Dix, who really emerged last year as a guy. Owen Freeman, co-freshman of the year, should have been freshman of the year, co-freshman of the year, but still, again, another one of those guys I was very lucky to have. He could have been poached by just about anybody. He's coming back to school. Of course, on top of that, you've got some depth pieces, Laji Dembele, Brock Harding. We mentioned Payton Sandfort. You lose Patrick McCaffrey and Tony Perkins to the portal, Ben Krikke to graduation, but there's some nice pieces. You pick up Morehead State transfer Drew Thelwell, Seydou Traore, an athletic 6'7" wing from Manhattan College, who's young. He's only going to be a sophomore. That's a future building block. You throw in Cooper Koch, who is a highly acclaimed recruit, Chris Taggio, who you like a lot. It feels like if Fran McCaffrey is kind of going toward the end here, that it looks like a good team. I mean, it just looks like a lot of pieces that he can work with right now.
And that's where you put him right there. And you say he has the opportunity to take this team from being a borderline NIT team to a minimum a bubble team and beyond. You look at Josh Dix, the way he developed to me was just fantastic. He was their best backcourt defender, a really good distributor, a glue guy, kind of like way Connor McCaffrey played, except, a much better offensive player, I think, scorer that way. Owen Freeman, who, how do you be freshman of the year? He's like second all time to Jared Sullinger in most freshman of the week honors. And how are you the co-one? I mean, that's just ridiculous. I think those three, coupled with Drew Thelwell, who might be a good distributor, and we won't know if he's like Bakari Evelyn, kind of a rotational guy, or a legitimate starting point guard in the Big Ten until you start to see him go throughout, probably early December. But if those four could be the guys, and I think you've got pieces that can play five. Laji Dembele developed last year. I thought he was a really good piece by the end of the year. I think Cooper Koch could be a really good player. Chris Taggio could be the same way. And then you throw on some of the other guys. A Brock Harding can be a good rotational guy, probably a point guard. Traore, also can compete for minutes. I'm not going to put him as a starter yet because I want to see what the transition is from Manhattan to Iowa City. That's just, there are other guys that are competitive too. So, but I think you look at it and you go, there's probably 8 or 9 guys that can have a pretty good rotation, and maybe that fifth spot, you figure it out as the season progresses. But this team looks to be the part. And then their schedule, the non-conference is, their non-conference tournament is a home one, with South Dakota being their key game, which we can pan all we want, and deservedly so. But other than that, they'll have a chance to really build a team in chemistry wise before they get in the meat of the Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, and don't forget Riley Mulvey coming off a redshirt year. I mean, who knows? Maybe he can develop into something. Maybe not, but maybe. And you got Evan Bronze as well in the middle.
Right.
That was our appetizer topic there, Scott. And before we get to the main course, let's all pour a glass of delicious Steeple Ridge bourbon. Steeple Ridge delivers a high-quality, delicious drinking award-winning craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer or grocer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge, distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. Scott, one of many things you're working on, and we're going to try to wrap up early because you got some other stuff going right this afternoon, is a piece on The Athletic called Chicagoland Confidential. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
I'll let you kind of set up that piece, and that will lead into the topic we want to talk about next.
Yeah, this piece I wrote in tandem. I actually had two stories today. One was in tandem with Jesse Temple, our Wisconsin writer. We asked 8 different high school coaches in the Chicagoland, 4 parochial, 4 public, their opinions on different coaches, coaching staffs, the ones that are kind of local to the Chicagoland, the ones that are more outlier, out of state, best recruiters, best head coaches they deal with, kind of up and down the list. And then NIL. That was a really fascinating development. We split it up and to go through and talk to these coaches. And, I would say that out of the schools that fared the best, Iowa was number 1. Iowa universally was considered the best school by each of the coaches. None of them had anything bad to say about Iowa. Most of them, when you asked, okay, who's the best assistant you deal with? Every single one of them said Seth Wallace. And Iowa is unique in how it recruits the Chicagoland. And this is the second story I had. I had a chance to sit down with Seth for 3 hours the other day and kind of go over this and among other topics. And we talked about how Iowa divided up the Chicagoland. I mean, we're talking about the nation's 3rd biggest market, one where the Aurora, you can get there in less than 3.5 hours. And when you consider the time to go from West Des Moines to Iowa City, there's 2. That's not a whole heck of a lot farther. And so, actually, it's more like 3 hours or less to Aurora, if you're driving normally. And so when you're going there to the Chicagoland, it's closer to Iowa City than Sioux City, than Council Bluffs, even, about on par with Fort Dodge. So what you wanted, Iowa considers the Chicagoland an extension of Iowa. The sprawl goes east. And they decided uniquely to position just Seth as the primary recruiter there. He said at times it's overwhelming, but it also allows them to be individually one person, one contact, nobody stepping on each other's toes saying, hey, I'm going to be at Joliet Catholic, I'm going to be at Barrington, I'm going to be at Aurora, and then you're trying to figure out who's going to be where. And, I already talked to that kid. And, oh man, we've only had, you only get 1 visit per school in the spring now. And so you don't want to have somebody stepping over toes. So, and at point of contact, it's really worked, because then you look at the other schools in that area. Illinois had some staff changes, even under Brett Bielema, where they've had guys move in and out, and some parts of Chicago are one guy, some are another. And there's been some inconsistency there. With Notre Dame, they're big game hunting. So they're going after the 4 and 5 stars, just like Ohio State and Michigan. You look at Northwestern, they've had some turnover and they've done pretty well, but they also have academics issues. And then finally, the joke that Morehouse and I always used to have, which was Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan State were 3 polar bears fighting over the same sheet of ice. Michigan State's a non-factor now in the Chicagoland, and Wisconsin is not as proficient as it once was. So Iowa has filled that vacuum. And on top of it, Chad, and this is probably the most important piece for Iowa now and potentially going forward, is that with the transfer portal, there are a lot of schools that go into the Chicagoland, and they're going to tell coaches, I would love to take this kid and develop them, but we only got 12 scholarships for freshmen incoming, and we've got to hit kids that get now that can play right away. Otherwise, I'm going to get fired. So they might only get a handful of guys, and maybe it's certain here. Iowa still, people, it may drive people nuts, but look at the numbers. The numbers are freaking amazing. How they go and they develop these 3 stars out of the Chicagoland. I went back through, Chad, all these numbers, and they've got 16 kids right now on scholarship or on the roster who are from the Chicagoland. 12 or 13 are scholarship. But even the ones that are from 4 years ago, There's Jamari Harris, Sebastian Castro, Lucas Van Ness was one of them. LaShawn Williams, developmental guys that now are starters or in the NFL. They maximize those guys. And that's why the Chicagoland loves Iowa. They're not afraid to take a chance on that 3-star and say, give them 2 to 3 years. They know they're developmental kids. And so, throughout this process, something we already kind of knew, but was reinforced, and the coaches all said it over and over and over again. This is why they like Iowa. They want to steer guys to Iowa. And Iowa's also still old school enough to say, don't tell them all the sweet stuff. Tell them that when they come in, it's non-negotiable. You're at 6 a.m. weightlifting in the summer. You're going to have a grind. It's going to be tough, but it pays off when you see, and the attrition level. I mean, there's only been, out of that, from 2019 onward, 2 guys have left from the Chicagoland. One was David Davidkoff, medical issues. 2 was Jacob Bostic, which was a surprise to everybody, ended up at wide receiver. But they've already got 3 commits that are Chicagoland and 1 kind of on the outside. 3 more visiting next month. They are heavy into Chicago, and Chicago is basically an extension of Iowa at this point.
Wow. Great stuff there. Make sure you guys read what Scott's work at The Athletic and what they're doing with that article. Obviously, Tyler Barnes, also kind of a Chicago/Illinois guy that helps Iowa's presence there, the consistency there. And another prospect you didn't mention, John Nestor, the star of the spring, is from Chicago Marist. So, the pipelines just keep continuing there. And that leads us into kind of what we wanted to also talk about here, Scott, which is, stick with me here. Lisa Bluter abruptly kind of retired, 2 weeks ago? And associate head coach was in place. All of a sudden, Iowa football now has an assistant head coach, Scott. Do you think there's any parallels there for potential Kirk Ferentz retirement?
Yes and no. The parallels to me, though, are Jan Jensen to Lisa Bluter is what Phil Parker is to Kirk Ferentz. There's the age gap that's kind of similar, about a 8 to 10 year age gap. And then there's also, the longevity. Jan Jensen's on the was on the short list of being one of the best assistant coaches in the country. Phil Parker certainly won the Royals Award. But Iowa football went in a different direction with assistant head coach in Seth Wallace, who is kind of, in some ways, a protege of Phil more than he is Kirk. But it also, I think any of us who know him and know the trajectory of Seth's career will be a head coach and has had offers to be a DC or heavy discussions, Minnesota, Purdue, Northwestern, Nebraska. Others have inquired, why wouldn't you? I mean, based on the Iowa defense and what he's been able to do. Seth has the demeanor, the ability to be a head coach of a Big Ten institution in a very short period of time. However, Chad, this is where I want to kick it to you. Let's say after December, maybe Iowa gets to the playoff. They win 11 games. Who knows what happens in the playoff. Kirk Ferentz says, I hit 600 in my career winning percentage. I'm a Hall of Famer. I've had 200 plus wins now in my career at Iowa. It's time for me to enjoy time with all the family scattered all over the country. Is Seth Wallace, does he step in? Is he that guy? Is Phil Parker? Where does Iowa look this year? Let's start with 2024/25.
Yeah, it's I feel like just on the surface, I don't know if that was what Kirk had in mind. I don't think it necessarily was. I think it was somewhat a big part of it was sort of that Seth's got the head coaching. He's got a lot of head coach attributes, let's say. Phil Parker that probably doesn't have. Seth Wallace, very good with the media, for example. Just one example, doesn't mind being, speaking and talking. I know he did a podcast yesterday with business leaders in Iowa City. He doesn't mind doing that. I'm not going to say Phil would bristle at that, but that's just not him, for example. Now, LeVar Woods also very good at that kind of stuff. And I think it was, also think because South was aggressively pursued by PJ Fleck, that
Yes.
Iowa needed to do something to keep him and raise his salary. So I think that was also part of it. So I'm reluctant to say, oh, here comes type of deal like with Jan Jensen, but it at least starts the conversation of what happens if Kirk does hang it up. Let's year. Now, again, we've been hearing that kind of stuff for 10 straight years, basically. Oh, this is Kirk's last year. I can feel it. I can sense it. How many times have we heard that? Just, this has got to be it, right? And then it never is. And it doesn't seem like he's like slowing down in any way. In fact, somebody I talked to yesterday, Scott, very plugged into the program, was like, now that like the Brian stuff's behind him, the racial bias stuff is behind him. It's almost like he's kind of he's almost kind of sailing on, in cruise control, not in like that he's laying off the gas or anything, but like he's still going 75 miles an hour down the interstate. Now there's like, he's out of traffic and he can finally go for a little while, And so I'm curious, who knows what he's going to do, but yeah, we wanted to have the conversation here about if, and I think immediately like a Seth Wallace handoff wouldn't necessarily be as warmly received, because I think it's probably a top 15, top 20 national job, maybe 25, I would say, given the Big Ten money, the consistent winning percentage. But as you outlined, Scott, and I know I'm talking in circles here, there's a lot of continuity that could be kept too by that kind of a move to keep it in-house, whether it's Seth or LeVar or Phil or whatever. And how much continuity would there actually be too? That maybe I'll pose that to you, Scott. If Kirk Ferentz goes, does Tyler Barnes, who's very highly sought after, has been very loyal to his father-in-law, does he maybe take that jump to, like, let's say at Notre Dame, something like that, a big school that could, where he could maybe make a different mark? Or does he stay loyal to whoever the next head coach is, to Iowa City, whatever? I don't know. There's a lot of fun tangents on this whole deal. I'll let you take it from here.
It's pure speculation, and that's what makes it fun and entertaining, because everybody's having the same conversations, whether they're at the, they're drinking, their bourbon, and we know what kind they need to drink, right, Chad? What kind? Tell everybody.
Steeple Ridge bourbon. Smooth. No, I'm just saying. I already did the ad read.
Yeah, I know. I was just letting you have a kind of your voice sounds better saying Steeple Ridge. But
thank you, Steeple Ridge. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at, I last week, I actually shared a car and a flight with Kirk Ferentz. We sat for an hour in a car going to LAX after the Big Ten meetings, and really had great conversations, I would say. And then we sat with each other at the airport terminals waiting for our next flights and stuff. And I agree with you that his efficacy, his demeanor is relaxed now, more so than I've seen him. I mean, he's kind of been tense at times, and certainly in the last 4 to 5 years, it's been that way, and rightly so. But, I always say happiness is aurora in your rearview mirror when you're leaving the Chicagoland, because it's like, here we go, 988. And I think Kirk might be heading that way. I don't see a reason for him to retire this year. He loves the sport. He's doing a great job. And Chad, we look at statistics and the wins and losses over the last 5 to 6 years. They're better than the previous 5 to 6 years, and they're as good as they've ever been. So and you look at recruiting, Chad, and the numbers are great. The development's been fantastic. For an Iowa, it's really about the offense. So but let's say, the speculative scenario plays out. Kirk decides, you know what, I'm going to step away. I'm 69 years old, and Mary and I want to travel. I don't think that's the case. I think he wants to sit on his deck, but he wants to see his grandkids and all that. Okay, that's good. But with Iowa, I don't think that there would be the natural turn. I think there would be the interview process with Seth, with LeVar in particular, those two, kind of like 25 years ago, where you had you had Donnie Patterson, and you had Chuck Long, who were interviewed, who were insistence. But then I don't know that they would be ready for the Iowa job. It would be kind of a leap of faith because there would be some heavy hitters out there wanting this gig. I mean, the separation level of the Big Ten and the Big 12 right now would demand that a Chris Kleiman, a Lance Leipold, somebody, it might be somebody else that might say, you know what, I really want that job. But what about the continuity? And this is where Iowa is uniquely structured. I would say outside of offense right now, which is clearly the weak link, defensively, there's not a better staff in the country than what Iowa has. Kelvin Bell is an outstanding teacher, a fundamentally sound coach. Seth Wallace, you're not going to find a better teacher, period, of the game. We know what Phil Parker is capable of doing. Tyler Barnes, people want to point fingers and, nepotism, blah, blah, blah. Well, he was working at Iowa before he started dating Kirk's daughter. And he does have that ability to be a high-level personnel chief for, and Iowa's at a high level, but, not necessarily blue blood status. But if you were Washington, if you were, Michigan, if you were somebody like that, it's like, hey, we need somebody to go out and identify talent. Tyler's your guy. He's that good. So you have that kind of broad base there that if you wanted to maintain it the way Iowa women's basketball did, you're in great shape. But also, are you a little bit afraid that what if there is a letdown? What if there's your rookie mistakes? So I think this conversation is much more apt in 3 years as opposed to this December.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was going to finish this, Scott, because I know we want to move on to other topics. But yeah, I think you said it exactly right. Those guys would be interviewed, assuming they wanted to be interviewed for the head coaching job, but it certainly wouldn't be a formality, maybe like the Jan Jensen situation was. And, obviously it should be at this point. Now, 3 years down the line, maybe the conversation changes. Maybe there's, a clearer succession plan in place. Maybe Tim Lester is really moving the offense, and I don't know. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. But I would be curious, I guess, if it was a Seth Wallace regime, for example, 3 years from now, let's say, how many, who would be retained, and that's where, at that point, you probably feel like Phil is maybe. I don't know. Who knows? You can't predict that guy.
Yeah.
But he'll be mid-60s by then. What about LeVar? What about Kelvin? What about Liddell? I mean, none of these guys are loyal to Kirk first and foremost. I don't know about. I just don't. That's nothing against Seth. I just don't know. We don't know the dynamic enough to know. Hey, is it time to leave the nest finally for some of those guys who are highly talented, like LeVar, Kelvin? I mean, good grief. Abdul Hodge, rising star. I mean, you go on and on.
Sure. You don't know any of those dynamics. I mean, if it's Seth, for instance, maybe Abdul would flip over and replace him at linebackers. And, if he was able to maintain Kelvin and Phil, and Phil's in a great shape. So Phil could probably coach till he's 80. He's like Dick LeBeau, I mean, there wouldn't be any issues there. But you have like Tim Lester, what if he's great? What's going to be his, he's going to want to be a head coach again. Maybe he would be. And, and Seth in 3 years, what happens if Illinois doesn't pan out under Brett in a couple of years? I mean, they had a real letdown, and if 8-4 is their high point, and if they're having another losing season and maybe a third one or Purdue or something like that.
And Seth can get him into Chicago.
Yeah. I mean, if you're Illinois and Brett's not the guy, and I think Josh Whitman's the best AD in the country personally, but you look over and you're like, hey, this guy's legit. And everybody who read the Chicago Confidential who wants to get into Chicago might say the same damn thing. So, you might, Purdue and Illinois, a Pitt, some of those schools that are maybe on a slightly lower tier than Iowa, next year or the year after, you might say, let's go after this guy. He's the right guy. And he was dismissed from the racial trial before there was even a conclusion because there was zero evidence of anything there. So, but LeVar is certainly proven himself to be a leader of men, as they say. And I think he would be a commodity that you absolutely have to take a look at. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision that they were going to go assistant head coach between those two, because I know those two did want that. And LeVar is very much, he's a Hawkeye. He played in Iowa. He's from Iowa. So there's a lot to like there. I think the good thing is Iowa is in a great position, Chad, football-wise. And the Brian situation was so unfortunate because it was just a constant boulder, that kind of shackled the program. And now, I hope Brian can move on. He's at Maryland now. I hope he can become an assistant somewhere else and kind of get his life back in order. But I think now that they are kind of exhaling, and they've got a little wind at their back. They're gonna take a dip after this year defensively because they're going to lose so many guys. But I don't think it's going to last that long. I think they're in a really good position in this new look Big Ten, and a lot of people may have scoffed at that. But I know I'm rambling, but I really think Iowa's in a great position right now, football wise.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a lot of people, after seeing how Beth Getz handled the women's basketball process almost perfectly, I would say. I bet fans have a lot more. I feel like fans have more confidence in how she's going to handle it going forward too. That's not going to be, I don't know. Right now, you just feel like she's going to have the right instincts, the right plan for whatever's going to take place. Not saying it's going to be perfect, but you do feel more. I feel confident in whatever she's going to do whenever that day comes. And she has said, I just listened to her on some podcast and talked about just being prepared for those moments. And certainly she was with Lisa Bluter and would be if something, abruptly happened with Kirk Ferentz as well. Scott, before we move to our next topic, I know you got another sponsor to give a beautiful shout out to here on this Thursday.
I absolutely love this one, and that's Canoer Garden Center. I cannot wait to get to Central Iowa to go to Canoer Garden Center and check it out. It's time to plant, grow, and love. I mean, planting, you probably want to start getting that done, but loving, that can last you all summer. Canoer Garden Center has the best annuals, perennials, hanging baskets, and so much more to bring the color and beauty of the season to your home. Shop the family-owned Canoer Garden Center, where nearly everything they sell is locally grown too. 2 locations, Grimes near Toyota of Des Moines on Highway 141, and in Ankeny, right at the corner of Ora Labor and Ankeny Boulevard. Gift certificates are always available at canoergardencenter.com, and their Glasshouse Gift Market has a tremendous selection of great gifts and home accents to shop. So head on over to Canoer Garden Center. You won't be disappointed.
So for a second straight week, we're going to punt our planned Spencer Lee conversation. We're just running out of time on a piece that ran in Sunday's Register. But we'll talk. He's got the Olympics coming up. There's plenty of time to talk about that. But let's talk about something else going on a national level regarding a former Hawkeye, Scott. And that is the Kate Martin effect. It's not the Caitlin Clark effect right now. It's the Kate Martin effect. My God, this has been unbelievable. What an unbelievable story this has been. I retweeted something last night where her jersey sold out in 4 hours, and they're scrambling to make more number 20 Kate Martin jerseys in Las Vegas. Lots of black and gold in the arenas where she goes. And and it's not just like a courtesy, sideshow. She's contributing at a high level for a high level team. It's like the absolute perfect situation. And Dargan and I talked about it on Hawk Central last night. Like, she is having a totally different rookie experience than Caitlin Clark is. Like, she is getting just poured on with love, adoration, almost like Caitlin did for the last 2 years at Iowa. It's almost like, and I talked to Kate's parents a few weeks ago, right when after she made the roster, and it was like, yeah, we acknowledge she is a celebrity now.
Kate Martin, what a wonderful story. What a wonderful person that's bridged the gap. I mean, on draft night, we were all like, whoa, we couldn't believe it. I think she was too. And, that she was getting drafted, and it was kind of like, Kit from a league of their own, I got you in this league, it was almost felt that way with Caitlin Clark. And instead, not only does she stay, she's thriving. She's the most popular player right now in the league. I mean, her jersey sales are the best. I mean, that is amazing for Kate Martin to have the Kate Martin effect. And, she acquired the same nickname she had at Iowa. She acquired it organically in Las Vegas. She's Money Martin, and she's out there making plays. And, at times she got caught a little bit defensively last night in like some sort of transition and missed out on some closeouts on her 3-pointers, but that's going to happen. She also got it back, made those own threes. She's come up with big plays. She's beloved by her teammates. She's fit right in, even all the way down to her Hello Kitty backpack she was forced to wear to Minnesota. So you hear the Hawkeye fans just, the adoration and cheering. And, that was last night what we heard, that there were still so many fans there. And of course, a bunch of people went up to see her, including Monica Zanano and Gabby Marshall and a few others. I couldn't be happier for her because this is such a wonderful experience. I wasn't sure I thought she might get into a camp, Chad, honestly. And I thought maybe she has a chance, but maybe she should go ahead and just be an assistant coach. No, she has staying power. And she went from, playing for a Hall of Famer with Lisa Bluter and one of the best coaches and her aunt, Jan Jensen, to now playing for one of the 10 best basketball coaches, period. Any level, any gender, in Becky Hammon. Mm-hmm. She's going to learn so much. By the time she's 30, unless she's still playing, she's going to be leading a program to the Final Four.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Troy on Twitter /X. He made the comp. Another former number 20 who Becky Hammon coached, who wore the black and silver uniform, was Manu Ginobili. And he was kind of a do-it-all, I don't want to say rugged, but like just kind of like hustling type of player. And so it's kind of, there's a little bit of parallel, a little bit of symmetry there with Kate Martin. I mean, I texted her dad last night, and I was saying, my God, she looks fast. Like she is racing up the court. Like her hustle is impressive. And I know Iowa plays at that fast pace, and I'm sure that's helped her a ton, but just the spacing she creates, they leave her open in the corners in part because they have a great team. And it's just like, she's like the perfect type of fit. And I know there's like this narrative out there. Oh, it's just a PR stunt or whatever, you know what I mean? Like they just, doing it for the jersey sales or whatever, but it's like, she's actually performing. She outscored Caitlin Clark in their head-to-head meeting the other day. Yeah. She's playing 20 plus minutes a game for the 2-time WNBA champs. It's just such a heartwarming, great story. It's in its infancy, of course, but like, I can't even think of like a football or basketball comparison, Scott. Like this is almost like out of nowhere in a sense. And I mentioned this on our show last night, like maybe Kate Martin was just like, we all thought it was like Caitlin Clark and everyone else, you know what I mean? But like maybe Kate Martin was like a great player the whole time and, just kind of played her role all with, you know what I mean? And it's just really cool to just see all this. And then I guess I'm repeating myself at this point, but yeah, it's a cool story.
There's a reason why they went to back-to-back final, national championship games, and it's not just because they had the best player in the country. It's they had to have pieces around that person to do it and do it well. And Kate Martin showed it; she was able to do it and do it successfully. And I guess if I could offer one comparison, and it's not the same because there's no, especially when you're crossing sports, it's not apples and oranges. But Brock Purdy's story. In some ways, she's not a great one. She's not a quarterback, but she fit right. He fit right in the 49ers, and they didn't miss a beat. In fact, they all kind of consolidated around him, and he took them to the, NFC title game and then the Super Bowl the next year. And I think Kate Martin kind of fills that void, that vacuum, because they have stars. They have the best player in the world, and Aja Wilson, Kelsey Plum, who I don't know if I'm alone here. I kind of think I'm not. But watching her play, the joy that she plays, the way that she plays, I'm like, wow, that's fun basketball. That's the Caitlin Clark effect to me. Is now it's introduced me to other players that I've heard about, never really watched. And now I'm like, wow, she's fun. I really enjoy that aspect of it. And then Kate Martin kind of steps in and does that. And I don't know if you got the same impression that I did, Chad, last night. I'm watching the Lynx. I'm watching the Aces, two of the higher level teams in the WNBA, and I'm watching the spacing, the way they play, the schematics that are involved. Kind of like, Iowa was that way. Certainly South Carolina, and I'm watching that, and then you watch the Fever, and you're like, just what in God's green earth are you guys doing? I have no idea on conceptually. I have no idea.
I think they're tanking for Paige Beckers. I think.
Well,
it's the only explanation.
Yeah, and she's probably going to end up in Golden State, with the Valkyries. I look at this and I'm going, there's just nothing here. It's selfish hero street ball. There's no spacing. There's nothing on offense. Caitlin's the point guard, but there's no setting up her for any kind of shots. The screens are bad. Just every aspect of that stupid team is just what are you guys doing? And then you look at coaching and it's like Caitlin's having her best game, 30 points. I mean, God, she's scoring like crazy. Let's set her out. And then they go on a run. And there were natural stops, Chad, in that game where they didn't even have to call a timeout. And they could have, there was natural breaks, free throws, get her back in there. They're on a 6-0 run. Nothing. I dare say, Chad, in the 18 teams in the Big Ten and the 16 teams in the Big 12, there are 34 head coaches in those two leagues who are far and away better than what she's getting right now in Indiana. All right, I'll get off my soapbox and I'll let you take it from here. But.
Yeah, Christy Sides definitely public enemy number one right now among Hawkeye fans for sure. You said it perfectly. I have nothing to add. We want to get out of here because you're busy, but there is stuff to work on. I don't know what you want to say about. I know some scheduling news is coming out later, so I'll let you wrap us up since you're our scheduling guru here on Legends and Listeners.
Yeah, I am embargoed officially until 1:30 Central Time before I can say what is going on. But I will say this, that the Cyhawk game will be on a major network, and it'll probably be at a fun time of the day for a lot of tailgating. And then I'll say you might be a little bit surprised with kickoff times related to the Black Friday game. It might be a little dark outside, so at kickoff. So that's as far as I can go, because otherwise I'm gonna get in trouble. Can't get in trouble. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But anyway, yeah, it's holistic. There's a lot to talk about in that, but probably more Big Ten wide, and I won't take up any more time here with that. But first three games. You're going to get some either or times for probably some homecoming events. And then Black Friday will be set. And I won't say which will be the first game that day, but it will be, and probably will surprise you guys.
Very interesting. And it's always good, for Hawk fans and Cyclone fans to know when the games are going to be, for planning, all that stuff. It's exciting to make your September plans. We're not that far away, Scott. It's really coming up. I mean, we're going to be at Big Ten Media Days in 2 months? So
yeah,
we got to get our vacation in here soon.
Yeah. I mean, that's the more important thing. I mean, when people start talking about, I can't wait till football season, I'm like, slow it down. It comes when it comes, and it's fast and it's furious. Let's give ourselves the little bitty part of summer, which to me is Memorial Day to 4th of July, and then it's like a boomerang. Next couple of weeks after that, it's like, okay, here it comes. And they just need to get those hotel prices down in Indianapolis, because it is astronomical, higher than the Combine, higher than the Big Ten championship game. They need to bring those things down.
Well, meantime, watch some Las Vegas Aces. That's a lot of fun. That's fun basketball to watch, not the frustrating basketball of the Fever. So, but you might need the WNBA League Pass for a lot of their games. But still, I'm really enjoying, like you said, I'm enjoying watching. I mean, Kelsey, like you said, like watching Kelsey Plum, I just love it. She's so good. And Aja Wilson is incredible. And then, and then you get to watch Kate Martin and Megan Gustafson too. And Kia Stokes, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, we've got so many connections. So many connections. It's just a fun team all the way around. Anyway, that's our soapbox, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of fun. Can't wait to continue to watch.
All right. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Thanks for joining us on Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. Talk to you next week here on the Iowa Everywhere